But we are going to be talking about resumes and cover letters, and I want to keep this conversational. So I want to start it off by asking you a question, and that is, what do you typically think of when you are sitting down to do a resume? What feelings are popping up for you? Frustration. Yep, absolutely. What else?
Where do I start?
Where do you start? Good. Maybe you're a little confused as to what you're supposed to do, feeling a little drained, maybe feeling that stress, feeling some pressure. Oftentimes this pressure is coming from family, friends, maybe it's coming from yourself. And you know, that oftentimes when we're sitting down and doing our cover letter or resume, our feelings that we have are going to start projecting onto the paper. So maybe that bullet point's not going to be as complete because you're like, I'm stressed out, I just want to be done. So we really want you to get to that point where those feelings of stress become feelings of being excited, feeling determined, having a little bit more hope for the future, hope for graduate school, whatever it is you're creating your resume and cover letter for. Let me ask you this. So where do you actually start? What do you put on the resume? And we're talking about resumes here. Education, good. What else? Your name. Yep, absolutely. Definitely want that on there. Work experience. Skills. Contact information. Good. So this kind of is leaning onto that question about targeting your resume. So you also want to make sure you have the job description. That doesn't mean you're copying and pasting the job description onto your resume, but it means you're looking at that job description to make sure you're mirroring that onto your resume. So with a job description, so that's really money in your hands because everything that the employer is looking for is on that piece of paper. And so if you're able to look and see what kind of requirements and qualifications they want and put that on your resume as much as possible, you're going to show them that you're matching their needs. And that's ideal. That's what you want to do. That's going to get you to that interview. So the main reason why you're doing that resume and the cover letter is to get to that interview stage. So that means you're probably going to have multiple resumes. So an easy way to do this is to break it down into industries. So you're not going to necessarily have just one blanket one. So I did hear a question about how do you create a resume if you don't know exactly what that is. If you pick a couple of industries, maybe it's marketing or maybe it's graduate school, maybe you have separate resumes for each of those and try to make it easy for yourself as you're switching out words for the job description. Any questions about that? Okay, cool. All right, so this also means you have to think about what's unique to you. You don't want to necessarily, again, copy and paste what's on the job description and put that on your resume. You want to think about what you've done that's really special. Maybe you studied abroad. Think about that experience. What did you do when you studied abroad? Did you learn a language? Did you interview people, a different culture? Thinking about what specific projects you worked on that could be really valuable to a particular employer. Maybe you also have a part-time job, so maybe you're waitressing. That can still be a really relevant skill, especially when you have those transferable skills of communication and interpersonal relationships, speaking with people, multitasking. That information should also go on your resume. So thinking about what's going to be valuable to the employer and thinking about what you can bring is going to be really, really important. All right, so how much time does an employer take to look at a resume? 10 seconds. Any other guesses?
Like 2 or 3 minutes, maybe.
2 or 3 minutes. Okay. Any other guesses? Actually, less than 30 seconds, 6 seconds. So it's not very much time. If they decide that they want to interview you, they'll probably look at it in a little bit more depth. But in that first 6 seconds, they're going to decide if they want to interview you. So you have to arrange things so they see the most important stuff on top. It's kind of like a newspaper. So I was a journalist in my past life, and so I designed newspapers and I would write headlines and that sort of thing. So when you're looking at a newsstand, you decide to pick it up if it has an interesting headline. And it takes about 6 seconds for you to do that. And so like when the Ebola virus was coming out, like that was the only thing that was on the headlines and people were picking it up because they wanted to know about the Ebola virus. So that's similar to what you want to do with your resume. So you don't want to necessarily write Ebola virus all over your resume, but you do want to have some catchy headlines. So for sections, like instead of putting work experience, you could put relevant experience or field work experience, those types of words that are going to be more targeted toward what you want to do. Okay. So let's get to the nuts and bolts of what goes onto a resume. I heard a lot of good stuff that you need to put on a resume, so your name, a professional summary, your work experience, education, etc. So we're going to start breaking that down into the parts right now. So who you are. So we're going to start with your name. There's a lot of different ways you can put your name on top. The formatting doesn't really matter as long as your name is the largest that's on there. So 18 to 20 point font is usually what we recommend. So having your contact information, your address, your phone number, your email. How many of you have a LinkedIn account? Okay. So if you do have a LinkedIn account, you can actually customize your LinkedIn, and it can just be your name instead of 6104 by whatever it is. And so you can actually customize it and create a LinkedIn URL. So I would put that on there. If you don't have a LinkedIn, I would encourage you to get a LinkedIn, just so when an employer is Googling you, and they will Google you, they can see that you have a professional image out there as well. So this is fairly standard, but does anybody have questions about name? If it's a federal job, I would recommend putting your legal name, because they'll probably do some sort of background check. But otherwise, having your nickname. So when they do Google searches or anything like that, they can find you easily. All right. So the next section is going to be the profile summary. And so this is a section where you can start to really stand out. Do any of you have a professional summary on your resume already? So some of you. Okay. So it used to be that you would have an objective on top of your resume. And so this has changed some, because an objective really used to be what you would tell an employer you wanted to gain from a company. So maybe you were going to learn something from them, or maybe you were going to gain some sort of skill. This has really changed to be a highlights of qualifications section, so you can tell the employer what you can contribute. So talking about how you're going to do a specific task rather than the tasks that you're going to learn to do. This can be done in a lot of different ways. So it can be highlights of qualifications. It could be a professional summary. It can be in bulleted format, or it could be in a more paragraph format. So passion for understanding human cultures from a comparative perspective. That could be a bullet, for example. Are you passionate? Do you care? Maybe you accomplished something, so developed and implemented some sort of system for interviewing people. But these things, this is a really good area for you to switch out. When you're looking at a job description, this is one of the easiest places where you can say, okay, they're really looking for communication skills. I'm going to promote that on top, because that's going to be one of the first things that they see. Yes.
So That's qualifications, so that's also accomplishments because you got like developed and implemented. So
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely. So you can put accomplishments, and I would encourage you to put accomplishments right on top under your highlights of qualifications, because that's going to show how much more qualified you are when you're showing your accomplishments and doing something. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, developed and implemented does kind of indicate that accomplishment. Yep, that's good. You can even say, something like earned reputation for, and think about how your supervisors might talk about you. So if a supervisor says, Rachel's really communicative and she has a lot of interpersonal skills, that might be something you could put here, earned reputation for being interpersonal and being able to relate well with others. Any other questions about this section? Okay. Typically, the next section is your education section. So let's see. So the main things you want on there is your bachelor's, a Bachelor of Arts in Anthropology, obviously. You want that to be the first thing that they see, because that's going to show how you're unique versus Colorado State University. You still want to keep Colorado State University on there with the city and state. However, you want to make sure you put your bachelor's degree first, because that's showing your uniqueness. Any relevant coursework that might be helpful for the employer to see. Your GPA, if you're proud of it. And any memberships. You might even pull out memberships to certain clubs if you feel like you've taken on a leadership position or it shows some sort of accomplishment. Questions about this section? Education. This work can also be its own section if you want. You could just pull it out if there's some really relevant projects that you did in a particular course. Okay. All right, so this would be an example of a job description. So oftentimes I encourage students to actually print out the job description and highlight words that they could meet and show the employer that they have, and encourage them to put that on their resume. So this would be one for a citizenship program coordinator. So organizational skills, some of the ones that I highlighted, I didn't highlight all of them, but accuracy, written and verbal communication, effective working relationships, etc. And going to the next slide, interspersing some of those keywords into your resume. So having a related experience section, or maybe it's field work study section, whatever section you feel is appropriate for your experience. And then putting in sprinkling in those interpersonal skills or communication skills, critical writing, whatever that might be, problem solving. You always want to start your bullets with an action verb, so a strong action verb. I encourage people to think about that as tied with your task, but then also showing and telling the employer how you did it and thinking about those skills and how you did it. So what kind of skill did you do to accomplish interviewing 25 people? And then some experience down here. I always tell people to also put their job title first. Again, that's more unique than the organization name. So putting your job title first. If you were a volunteer, thinking about what you did as a volunteer. If you were helping out at a museum, what did you actually do? Were you a volunteer? But yeah, so you can put that on top as your job title. And then the dates of when you actually worked there. To beef that up a little bit more, so even if you're a part of sororities or fraternity or anything like a club, you can also talk about that experience, especially if you were in a leadership type of role. This is something that I encourage people to put under even its own section called leadership experience. So that could be something that you think about. But thinking about, okay, so this is a good, on top it is good, like the responsible for the operations, facility, and administration of 95-member club. If you want to talk about an accomplishment, talking about how you were a part of increasing membership could be good, and thinking about the percentage of how much did you do that by. Any sort of accomplishment. And think quantitative. So there's some quantitative information up here, but then also thinking about quantitative information and getting more specific with that. Okay. Was there a question? No. Okay. Okay, so some other possible sections you might have would be marketing, communications, okay, so relevant coursework, and then computer skills. So if you're getting a bachelor's degree, you probably have Microsoft Word experience. So employers aren't as impressed to see that. But if you put Excel or PowerPoint or something more specific, I would keep that on there. And then language skills. What other skills can people think of? Can you think of that you might put on there?
Sometimes they require certifications.
Certification. Yeah, it would be its own section. Perfect. And then also honors and awards. So those might be some sections that you have on your resume as well. And you can list those. That's just more like, here's my certification and the date of when you got it. Okay. So some general tips. So having white or off-white paper. So obviously right now in this digital age, you're oftentimes going to be using email to submit your resumes. However, when you're going in for that interview, I encourage people to also have copies of their resume to give to the interviewers. And so you want to make sure that it's on some kind of white or off-white paper, not pink or orange or whatever I have in my printer. And then the font size being no smaller than 11-point font. This is sometimes tricky, especially when you're trying to get it to that 1 to 2 pages. Using the font type Times New Roman, Arial, or Courier. So these will open up in any operating system, whether it's Windows or Apple. And then length 1 to 2 pages. If you're going to go to 2 pages, go to 2 pages. Don't do 1.5. But make sure it's also relevant. So if you have, oh yeah, you have a question? Oh, references is third? Yep. You actually don't need to put references on your resume. You can just have that in a separate Word document and have the name listed, their title, and their contact information and their relationship to you. Yep, that's a good question. So you don't even need to put references available on request. That can come off your resume if it's on your resume. But yeah, so I mean, that second page could be just your references, and that's fine. But with actual content, try to keep your resume to 1 to 2 pages. But again, make sure it's relevant content. And so if you do have a lot of different experiences, be picky about what you're promoting and look at that job description and see what they're looking for, because that's going to help you decide what you're going to actually put on your resume. So if they're looking for someone who, and I'm going back to that citizen program coordinator, if they want someone who has a lot of scheduling experience or coordinating with people, then you might not necessarily put on your resume that time you were just inputting information for a particular employer, if that's not what they're looking for. Okay. Any more questions about that? Being detailed and concise, being as concise as possible. You can fit a lot onto a page. Sometimes it takes some formatting, so maybe work with that as much as possible. I would not recommend having any, so I would say 1 inch on top and bottom, and then 0.5 inches on the sides for your margins. Okay. All right, so and also making sure someone reads it. This is really important because even spell check doesn't grab all of the different words. This is oftentimes a deal breaker for employers. So course and verse course, from verse form, college versus collage. I saw massage instead of message once. So that's oftentimes a deal breaker for employers because they automatically say, oh, this person's not detail oriented. So check the spelling and grammar. This just means you need to read it more than once, or have someone else read it, or have multiple people read it. This would be an example of a finished product. So having that professional summary on top, education, your relevant experience, and your skills. Skills, I have it broken down under the skills section into 2 different skills sections, but you can actually even break that down into language skills and computer skills. That makes it even easier for the employer. So let's talk about cover letters. There's lots of questions about cover letters. So cover letters are interesting because a lot of times they're just a technicality at this point. Employers just want it to see if you're a professional, if you're paying attention to the directions. And so they're looking to see if, you're just paying attention to the directions and you're actually going to send one. Some employers do find it really important and they're going to still read it, but a lot of recruiters are now saying, well, we're really not even asking or looking at it. So keep that in mind, but then also do one. So with a cover letter, this is really the bridge between you and your resume. So this is to get them to look at your resume. And it's usually broken down into three parts. So usually the first part is going to be your header. So I encourage people to use the same header that's on your resume on your cover letter. So if you used 18-point font and had everything centered on your resume, make sure that's the same on your cover letter. And then if there's some sort of job number for the posting, oftentimes they'll have job posting number 805 or something like that. Make sure that that's on your cover letter, and you can have just an attention or an RE with a semicolon that says that job number. And then also putting the job title. That first paragraph, you're introducing yourself. So you're gonna start it out with dear and having the person's name. That's really important. If you can find the person's name, that's just a nice touch. It's addressing them directly, so they're gonna feel addressed. And so that's always good to get that personal connection going. And so dear Mr., Ms., whatever, blank. And then that first paragraph, you're introducing yourself, and you're also going to talk about what your goals are, and you're going to talk about why this particular company is interesting to you. So this is where it gets targeted, because you're going to have to do a little bit of research to know why you actually want to work for that company. The second paragraph, you're going to start looking at the qualifications. So oftentimes a job description is broken down into 2 parts. It's going to have your job responsibilities, and it's going to then have the job qualifications. So focus on those qualifications because this is what they're going to be looking for out of you. So making sure that you're promoting communication skills, all those different transferable skills, as well as those hard skills that they're going to be looking for. So they might be looking for 2+ years of field work experience or something like that. So you want to put that on your resume in your cover letter. And then in that last paragraph, you're going to be concluding, but also try and ask for that interview. So maybe welcoming further discussion about your qualifications, and also putting your contact information in there. So putting your email and your phone number, however way you want to be contacted. Now, someone said, how do you stand out? You can also create QR codes to website portfolios, those types of things. Anything that is going to, does everybody know what a QR code is? I'm seeing yeses and nos. So it's those little squiggly box things that you scan with your smartphone, and it'll pop to a website. So you can actually generate your own QR code if you have a LinkedIn profile or if you have your own web portfolio. You could create one of those and even put that on your resume if you wanted. Cover letters are kind of tricky because those are one of those things that employers like to see, and they're going to make you stand out as a student, especially because I've heard from employers that a lot of students actually don't even turn cover letters in. So if you do, that's going to make you stand out for sure. So I do encourage you to create one for each employer that you do apply for. And an easy way to actually target that employer is to even put bullets in your cover letter. So you can, even in that second paragraph, instead of having a bulk paragraph, you could just break it down into bullets to make it really easy for you to target and erase and put more in. I encourage you to also come into the Career Center because we can help you get started on a cover letter or even a resume if you feel like you just want that extra, what do I do? With your references, so again, kind of going back to what we were talking about, no references available upon request. You're going to want to make sure that your references know that you're going to list them before you actually list them. And make sure that you know that they're going to say something nice about you. Sometimes I worked at another company before, and we would actually call references, and sometimes they did not say great things. So make sure that it's someone who really you trust and you got along with well. So informing them and thanking them after they actually do give you that reference. I think it's really easy to forget that part, especially when you're in the middle of job search. So, cool. All right, so your full application package would be the cover letter, the resume, and the references. We actually have examples of all of these on our website that you can find and access. And I also want to talk to you guys about social media a little bit. So I don't know if you learned a little bit about how to use social media in job search last time, but I'm going to go into that a little bit more. Did she already show you the alumni tool on LinkedIn? She did. She was able to actually show you? Okay. Okay. So I'll show you that because I think it's sometimes helpful to actually see that. Because it's a really cool. And also on Twitter. Twitter's really cool because you can actually, companies are starting to post their job opportunities online, and they're using Twitter to do that. And so if you have a company that you actually are wanting to work for, I would encourage you to follow them on Twitter and then also figure out what hashtag they use to promote their job opportunities. And you can actually search for those. Repler, I'm going to talk really quick about Repler. So Repler is a really cool tool because you can also make an account with them, and they'll actually scan your social media for any red flags. They won't take it down, but they'll let you know, and you can decide if you want to take down that picture from last Saturday night or leave it up. And it'll also flag if someone comments on a picture or curses in a photo. So it might be helpful to have that as you're doing your job search as well. So LinkedIn, I'm going to just show you this really quick. All right, so this is what you usually see when you sign into LinkedIn. If you have a company that you do want to work for, you can actually follow them on LinkedIn too. They'll post job opportunities there. Under the Connections tab, you can scroll down to find alumni. And the cool thing is this is all of Colorado State University's information, and you can see where you can actually look up people who just graduated in 2014. So this is kind of cool. So these are people that graduated in 2014, and it'll keep on loading. It'll also show where those people are working. So the top 10 for people who graduated: Hewlett-Packard, U.S. Air Force, City of Fort Collins, OtterBox, etc. So this gives you some ideas of some companies that you could look at. And then you can also search by anthropology. So I'm actually going to do that right now. And I'm actually going to just put it in the search box. All right. It also shows the skills that people who are anthropology majors have listed the most. And I'm going to scroll down, and then it pops up with people who have just graduated, and it gives information about what their title is, where they're working. And this just gives you some more ideas about, okay, well, what kind of job titles do I want? What can I actually do with my major? And what kind of companies could I maybe work for? So job titles, companies, industries. This starts helping you narrow that down a little bit more. And let's see what else. And you can just you can keep narrowing this search. So if you really want to do public speaking as a part of your job, you can look at what people are doing with that. But this can keep on narrowing down for as much as you want it to. Again, so top places anthropology majors were working: Target, University of Boulder, Denver Public Schools, Carrabba's, Poudre School District. So this gives you some more information too. Okay, what questions do you guys have about LinkedIn? Okay. LinkedIn profiles, I would suggest if you have one, great. I would say complete it. The thing about that is when an employer gets your when an employer gets your resume or cover letter, they're going to do a Google search. And so if your first image is a professional one, that's only going to bode well for you. And so I would definitely put something out there and get your picture up, maybe get a title on there. Instead of student at Colorado State University, what are you aspiring to be? You could be an aspiring archaeologist, maybe, something like that. Those types of things. Putting a summary in there. Having some kind of summary, projects that you've done. You might have a PowerPoint that you might want to put on here that you've done. You can do that. So having your online image reflect what you're seeing on your resume, keeping that consistent. All right. What questions? I wanted to leave some room for questions now. No questions. What was helpful or not helpful? It was all helpful. Okay, good. Good information. What's that? Yeah, absolutely. And definitely if it's going to provide the employer information. Yep. What else? Okay. Well, we certainly do resume critiques and cover letter reviews at the Career Center. So you can certainly bring it in during our drop-in hours. I told you those already. And I can write them down on the board as well. If you want to do an appointment, you can call that number. And then there's my email too. I'm one of 2 of the College of Liberal Arts career counselors. So there's 2 of us, so you can have your pick. But we're down, does everybody know where the new Career Center is? Has everybody been there? It's actually in the bottom, the basement of the Laurie Student Center. So if you take the stairs that are next to the food court, when you first walk in, we're right to the left. Cool. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.